Hey everyone, I'm Seth Whiting and I am a developer from Portland, Maine, and I've been coding for about 10 years now.
And I'm Jake Pacheco. I am a barber from Augusta, Maine, and I have been coding for about 5.5 months now.
5.5 months. Do you feel like you know any more now than you did 5.5 months ago?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, even just fundamentals wise, but yeah, no, I'm actually pretty stoked about it lately. I've been thinking about it because I Seth is. I mean, apparently, I think of you in the same way that I think of my girlfriend. So here we
Uh-huh.
are. No, I but I Chelsea has been coding with me lately, and which is sweet. I but she's like a few. I don't know, a few lessons back in Code Academy, but it's kinda cool because whenever she needs help, I can actually come over there and, like, chime in, and it's been kinda sweet to be able to do that, and, she'll be like, "Ah, it's just not going through," and I'll, like, look over, and I'll just be like, "Oh, yeah, it's this," which is, like, I
Yeah.
didn't think I would ever get there, so it's just that's been probably where I see it the most is
Hmm.
when I'm, like, kinda helping her out, I'm like, "Oh, man," like, I get what is going on in this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, so that's
Super
been
cool.
really cool. Yeah, yeah, and just been, going deep into this React jargon. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
How's the the introduction into the world of React been?
yeah. It's been good. I mean, it was really a crash course on the live coding sessions that we did,
Right.
which is great. But it's been one of those things where I've been like doing it now in Code Academy's lessons,
Hmm.
and I know a lot of it already, which is really cool. Like it
Hmm.
was like, oh yeah, yeah, I know like I calling to different components that I've set up and stuff. Like they just got into that stuff, and I was like, yeah, I knew all of this stuff, and
Yeah.
then just understanding the HTML and some of the CSS and stuff, and how all of that is written together and stuff. Like I don't know, that's pretty cool that I already kind of got it just from
Yeah.
the live coding stuff. Um,
Right. Yeah, but the live coding stuff is I was sort of just blasting through a lot of it and
yeah,
wasn't really expecting you to retain much of it,
uh,
but just
because
sort of getting some of the I want to say muscle memory or whatever. Like obviously
yeah,
you're not going to get muscle memory from just doing it
yeah,
once and
mhm,
kind of just blasting through it or whatever, but you will kind of see it in action and then Code Academy kind of explains here's
what it
what was
is.
actually going on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but some things in there, like when we were doing the live coding, are self-explanatory. Like you're writing in a file called Jake
Mhm.
and a component called Jake, and when you export default Jake, you have to import that into your other file in
What do
order
you
to
have to
call to
import?
it. Import Jake,
Oh, okay.
and it would be what import Jake as
Cool guy.
yeah, yeah, as cool guy. But like it's like it's isn't it like forward slash period or period forward slash space whatever.
It depends on where it is. That's
Yeah,
just your
yeah,
file path, your
yeah,
quote unquote relative file path from
yeah,
wherever you are, whatever file you're writing it in.
yas. But but yeah, so just certain things like that, like that were just kind of like you just pick them up and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
It makes sense that you'd have to have these talk to each other somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, did some of that. And then I did some stuff with attributes, which I think we had touched on a while ago.
Yeah.
And it might have been off of podcast when we were working on some like on click and on hover things. And I might be thinking of something else, but I think it was
Uh-huh.
attributes. And I think that it was that the same thing, Seth? Like
Uh,
when on mouse over, you'd like change the color or something. Would
mm,
that be considered an attribute or what would that be considered?
So there is like an on-click attribute that you can
Hmm.
use for a lot of like JSX elements, and maybe even all of them. I don't know if any of them like ban you from using that, but I don't think that there's an on hover one for
What was it on mouse
any.
over?
Yeah, or like mouse over like they. Oh, let me think here. If you do on mouse over, like that sounds like you'd be using like an event listener to me, which is
Yep,
something else.
that's something else entirely. Okay,
Yeah.
because that is what we were doing.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were just working on like making a thing look cool and making it so when you moused over, it would fade in
Uh-huh.
from
Yeah,
white
yeah.
or whatever. But so those aren't the same things, even though they're written kind of similar. It seemed, anyways. Like the pattern
Yeah.
in my head, I was like, oh,
So
I wonder
there
if this is
there
what I did before.
you can definitely do an on-click event listener,
Hmm.
but then you can also have like an on-click attribute to your component, which is it would kind of like, I guess it would work similarly, but you would write it very differently.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. I guess I guess that flows really well into the differences of why to use props or use arrays
Uh-huh.
differently. Because like they seem to kind of do a very similar thing. Like it seems that way anyways, but could you maybe give us a good definition of either or and
Yeah. So
and
it's kind of apples and oranges. They're not really equivalent in, like, conceptually speaking, they're not really like, you wouldn't really compare those two things. And
huh.
what I mean is like you could feasibly compare it to like an object, as the objects do come into play with them.
Hmm.
But so attributes are things that you add to your HTML, but also your JSX, because JSX is basically like the JavaScript version of HTML.
Yeah.
So if you have like a div tag in JSX or HTML, and
Hmm.
then you have like a style attribute on that div tag, that
Yeah.
that is an attribute. So
Yeah.
you would do like the angle bracket and then the word div and then space style equals blah blah blah.
Okay.
That that thing
I
where like you're saying something equals something within the
yeah.
the tag, the HTML
Mhm.
tag, that's that's how you know that's an attribute.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that we might have gotten a little mixed up here. I was talking about because I've been learning about props.
Okay.
And like prop was my question, but I don't know if what you were just talking about was leading into explanation about props.
It 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 does.
It does. Okay.
It does, but
Or is it?
it's also like a false like equivalency for
Yeah.
props and arrays as well.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's
I
but
just
it's
know that you can call to a single prop in another function or something, can't you? Like if you just like if you add prop as the argument, then you can include certain props in the function that you're about to write or something.
yeah,
I
and
think
like
that's
within the
I might be all
component.
messed up.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
no.
Okay.
So basically, what we're getting into here is the concept of parent components and child components.
Yeah.
And if you have a parent component that has some data in it, like an array or like a string, even just any variable. So if
Mhm.
you say like name equals Jake,
Yeah.
so and then you have like so this is like a list component, say, and
Yeah.
that's your parent component. And then within your parent component, you have like a whole like list of child components.
Yeah.
And each of those child components are called person, for
Mhm.
instance. So you have like five different person like HTML tags, that like
Yeah, yeah.
JSX tags. So
Yeah.
instead of them being called div, they're called person with a capital P, because that's how you name your components. So this is
Okay.
a child component that you have written or that you are about to write, and you're passing the attribute name equals Jake. And then you could
Okay.
have a person underneath that that says person space name equals Chelsea, you know? name equals Seth and so on. So you could have like your whole list of people, and they have attributes of names.
Yeah.
And then in your person component, which is usually going to be in a different file, you access the name attribute via a prop. So
Okay.
the attributes on the parent component that are feeding into the child component become props.
Okay. All right. All right. That wasn't, yeah, I didn't understand that. So, hey, hoopla.
but so here's where like I think where you're getting a little confused, where like you're talking about arrays and versus props. I think what
Mhm.
you're actually thinking about is objects versus props.
Okay.
And the way that you access your props in the child component is when you write your child component and you open up your parentheses, so that your child component is going to be written as a function.
Mhm.
Nowadays, like you have functional components. And so you'll write that as like function space person and then open parentheses. Or you could do const person equals open parentheses and then the arrow function. So you
Yeah.
could write it as the function keyword kind of function or the arrow function kind of function.
Yeah.
Either way, you're going to have some parentheses that you open up. And with React components, it's just always understood. And this is something that's specific to React. It's always understood that you're going to be able to access the props for that component as the first argument within those parentheses. So, and that's just something that React does for you. They
Hmm.
give you access to your props and as the first argument. So within those parentheses, you could just type the letter A and that would be equal to your props. Or you could type the
Hmm.
word props and that would be equal to your props.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, go
They
ahead.
have they have us writing in props right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how I understood to make it so you could actually see your props or access those. But are you saying basically that it automatically does that no matter what you put in that?
Yeah, so it's basically you're declaring a variable that
Mhm.
they are going to assign the value of your props.
Huh.
So you could call it props, you could call it A, you could call it like you could call it attributes if you wanted to confuse yourself. But
I'm
but
already
the
doing fine.
but the point is it's just like a variable that you're declaring.
Yeah.
And but the value of that variable is like pre-assigned for you via
Yeah.
like the magic of React.
Huh.
So that that can be confusing when like React does something for you. It's like, well, this is JavaScript, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is it
Yeah.
behaving, in a a way that only React behaves? It's just
It's just
a
what it
thing that
is.
comes with React. Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. It means that so basically, if I'm understanding React and everything all together now,
Mhm.
like those are your modules, right? Are like the what builds up React? Is that what it's called? Or a bunch of like modules? Is that what they are?
I
Am I
mean,
thinking of the wrong word? What's the right word, Seth?
oh, you mean like the things that React gives you
Yeah,
to work with?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you could call them modules, and they might call them modules in Codecademy, maybe.
I'm gonna wing it and call them that. But what I'm trying to get at is it's cool that it's that within all of that code, it's like automatically, hey, by the way, when this happens, it does this.
Yeah,
Like I think that's a positive, a positive if anything. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. No,
and
for
I
sure.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean,
helpful
yeah, yes,
for sure,
but I
like no question.
yeah, but I get what you mean. Where it could be like is should I expect all JavaScript to react this way? No, it's
Exactly, yeah.
just with React. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like if you declare another function within your component, like it's not going to pass anything for you. You need to
Yeah.
pass everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to get back to what I was talking about, so like you could call and basically when you open those parentheses at the top of your component, like when you're declaring your component, It gives you the props within those parentheses, and you can access it by just writing any word there. And then if you call it props, which you should, like if you're
Yeah.
gonna call it anything, you should call it props because that's like semantically correct. Then you can access all of your attributes by doing props dot name,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's how
that's
I've
going
been
to
doing it.
give you the value of Jake,
Yeah.
or
The value of name.
yeah, the value
Yeah.
of the name attribute that you
Yeah.
passed. Another thing that you will often see, and by the way, getting back to that, it because it's like props dot name, and that's how you get the value. That tells you that props is an object
Okay.
because
Yeah.
you're
Yeah. That
using
makes
dot
sense.
notation
Yeah.
to access its properties.
Okay. Alrighty. So that's probably what I was confusing myself with
Right.
there then.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense. It's just so many words to learn
Yeah.
and what they all mean. But yeah, no, that makes perfect sense though. Yeah. I was curious about that. And it's back to what you said earlier, or what you were asking earlier, where it's like, do you feel like you've learned anything? Like, it's funny because I am who I am, I like to listen to the older podcasts that we've done, and I like to pick myself apart, and
So
that's just me on a Sunday, you know what I mean? It's fine. Uh, but I was listening to, yeah, I mean, pretty much every episode that I've listened to, all the episodes we've released so far it was a few months back now, and it's kind of awesome that like I'll ask a question on it, old school me. Well, a younger, more bright-eyed Jake.
a young
Well,
and naive Jake.
yeah, young and naive, blinded by love. He'll ask a question. And nowadays I'm like, oh, that's not how you do that, Jake. Like it's just kind of cool to see like I don't know, that it's actually I'm noticing that I'm like, oh man, like and then you'll explain something and I'll be like, that's exactly right, Seth. Obvious. But it's like, but still, it's like kind of cool that I can like critique uh
Me.
like well, you too. I mean, well, just to be like, oh, that's what he because like I'll remember you saying that stuff,
Uh,
like and putting it the way that you do, but at the time I didn't understand it.
right.
So it doesn't really like the information doesn't, flow in my
Mhm.
brain yet. So I'll
Yeah.
hear you say it again. And now that I know more, and I'm like, oh man, that is such a good like a good way of saying that,
Mm.
which is cool. A good analogy and stuff. So, hey, kudos, Seth. You know, it it sounds good to me. But yeah, no, I just thought that was kind of cool. Recently, I've been like noticing that it's like I'll be listening to it, and usually Chelsea's in the car with me, and I'll just be like I'll old me will have said something, and I'm like, I was like, that was wrong. That ain't right. Like like finding an old Facebook post from ages ago that you'd get canceled for. That's not how you should have said that.
Nope.
But every once in a while, those memories haunt me. No,
Yep.
they're not. They're never that bad. They're never that bad. The worst thing will be like a joke about like I don't know something trivial, but
Like what?
nothing.
Say it now. Get canceled.
Oh man, it's brutal. I have one. I have one in my head. I'm not gonna say it. I'll say it out loud later. It's not like yeah. It's yeah.
All right.
It's funny. It could be said on like it's always sunny in Philadelphia, so it's not that bad. It's not like that.
Yeah.
It's not. And yeah. Anyways, you put me on the spot. Now I have to like let people know that it's like it's not that bad. It was just a 16-year-old Jake was a man who could say whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Not no mas.
So let me think here. So yeah, and sometimes you'll see like when you do props, when you access your props, you you will sometimes see people do what's called
Mm-hmm.
and this may be getting like don't worry if you don't completely understand this, but it's probably easier to understand this if I explain it in a different way where immediately after you declare your function and like you're inside of like the body of the function now, so like within the curly
Yeah.
braces, on
Yep.
the first line after that you could say const and then curly braces name
Oh. I've done that.
equals props.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've done this before, but continue.
Yeah.
Just
So
so
that's
just for
called
everyone else.
destructuring.
Okay.
So that gives you access to name as a variable everywhere else within that file after that. So
Hmm.
you can, instead of saying props.name, you can just
Yeah.
say name.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't get that. Like, I didn't understand that when they were doing it. Now it makes sense, but I didn't understand that in Code Academy 6.
Yeah. So
It was
it's giving you access to all of the different properties of that object, the props
hmm,
object. And you could do that with name. And then like if you passed another attribute called age, you could do name. So const curly braces, name, comma, age. And you could have access to both of them.
hmm,
And you could do that with like,
as many
20,
things as you
20
want.
different props,
Hmm.
20 different like attributes that you passed and
And
that become props.
you could just basically separate them all by commas,
Yep.
and it'll just pass all of them, or like it'll introduce those into the component that you're working on.
Yeah. So instead of all throughout your file saying props dot name, props
Yeah, yeah.
dot age.
It keeps you from having to do dot notation over and over and over again.
That's
Yeah.
cool. So, and then to take it one level further,
Oh man.
instead of saying like person equals and then parentheses props and then the arrow function, instead of grabbing it by the word props and then on the next line saying like destructuring it by
Honest.
saying
Yeah,
equals
yeah.
props,
Mm-hmm.
like curly braces, all of your props equals props, you can actually destructure it right within those parentheses. So
Nice. In the kind of, I would call it an argument, but is that the argument space?
yeah,
It feels like I'm writing it like an argument, but
yeah,
that's
exactly.
how
So like in like regular functions, those are
Mhm.
called arguments.
Arguments. Okay.
But in like React components, they refer to them as props because
Okay.
they're slightly different. Well, it's not even slightly different. So
It just
you're
automatically defaults to props, but it's your argument space still, and you
well,
can add
the
other
thing
arguments to it.
is, you can the props object is your first argument,
Yeah.
and then you could have another argument and
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a prop.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what I figured. That's I understood that from what you said earlier when you said it's your first argument. That
Yeah.
you calling it the first means that there can be a second, third, fourth,
Yes. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. And I could be wrong, but I think that they automatically assign the second prop as well, and I think that they automatically assign it to children, which we won't get into. But regardless, that like all I'm trying to say here is like they automatically assign the first one, and I think they already I think they also automatically assign the second one. Anyway, your first argument is the props, and that means that when you open your parentheses, you can then immediately open some curly braces and access name, age, and
Yeah, I was
whatever
wondering if
else
yeah,
within
yeah.
those curly braces. So
That's cool.
you don't have to do anything about like you don't have to write the word props anywhere. You can
Yeah,
just
yeah. It's
grab
just
them
yeah.
right from that the,
So
the
is that
argument.
just like, would they call that a I mean, you just call that an argument, right? You're not destructuring anything or anything. You're just
You are
calling it an
destructuring because you
you
have the
that's
curly
still
braces.
oh, yep. Okay. All
That's
right.
how you
Because so
yeah,
the
that's how you
curly
know.
braces. Okay, cool. Because I was wondering about that because I noticed that they like, man, they just be throwing curly braces anywhere in these codes. Like wherever it needs JavaScript, wherever JavaScript is
Well,
doing a thing, it seems like you're throwing curly braces in there. I was
so
wondering about that.
like I want to be careful about that because it's really just for when you're opening the body of a function
Hmm.
or accessing like doing something with objects specifically. It's
Oh,
not
it's object specific.
yes, yes.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that because like that's what I was wondering is like because I've used it a couple times at this point, and I'm like, okay, like is this just whenever I utter a word of JavaScript, I have to have it in curly braces?
No.
But it isn't. Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
that makes it so much less of a. I mean, there's moments like this, Seth, where it's like there's something that is a mystery to me,
Uh-huh.
and it's like it feels vast because it's a mystery.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, oh man, like how the heck, like how many, am I just gonna be writing curly braces all over the place? Because I don't understand yet
You're
that
just
it's
like,
like,
what's
no,
with all
that's
the curly braces?
what's with all the curly braces, guy. Yeah. So it's, yeah, that's cool. I
Yes.
was just, yeah,
So
that
when
was
you when
simple
you
objects
are when you're
and the
declaring
functions.
yeah, so when you're declaring objects, you would say like const person equals let me move away from person. That might be kind of like confusing because I've been using that
Mhm.
before. Any object. So you could say like const cat equals, and then you open your curly braces. That's
Mhm.
how
Yeah.
you declare an object. That's also how you destructure an object, which is
Okay.
like you put the curly braces before the equal sign and then the name of the object after the equal sign. You're kind of like doing it in reverse, like
Yeah.
you kind of structure it by putting the variable name before the equals and then the curly braces and then give it all of its properties. And
Mhm.
then to get all of those properties via destructuring, you put the curly braces before the equal sign,
Mhm.
grab all of the properties, and then have it equal to the object. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. You're just kind of reversing
Yeah,
in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
let me take it even one step further
Oh man. Oh, here we go.
and tell you about how you would do this with arrays, because you do it the same way. So when you declare an array, you say like dogs equals, and then square brackets, and then have like Sparky, Spot, Fido, whatever, just like a comma separated list of strings that
Yeah.
are like equal to whatever you want. In that particular example, I was saying their names,
Mm.
but it could be, you could say like their ages instead. And
Yeah.
the only thing is like you don't say like name colon whatever, because that would be an object. You just have
Mhm.
it be sort of like understood like this array is an array of whatever I want. It's
Yeah.
just a list of whatever I want.
Yeah.
So the way that if you wanted to, you could destructure that array by doing const and then square brackets. And then you could say like name one, name two, name three, and
Yeah.
then equals dogs array. And then
Mhm.
wherever you spit out name one, name two, name three, it would be Sparky, Spot, Fido.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Huh. I get what you're saying, I think.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's, it's one of those things where I think future Jake will go, "Yep, that makes perfect sense."
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I still think I do get what you're saying in the sense, but yeah, because you can call to a like a certain part of the array also, right? So it's like the array might be 5 names, and if I call to number 0 or
Mhm,
2, that or 0 or 1 or whatever, then it's
mhm.
gonna just pull that one up. Or are you saying they would just pull all of them up for name 1, name 2, name 3?
So basically, when you destructure an array,
Mhm.
you're saying like the first thing in the list of your like destructuring things, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going to be equal to like it's going to be the equivalent of like dogs array square bracket 0, because
Okay.
that's at the first spot.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the first thing is going to be at the 0 index. The second thing is
Yeah.
going to be at the 1 index,
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I get what you're saying now. I think I guess what confused me is when you were like name one, name two, that I'm like, well, how would you call to it in the array with just like name one?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't understand that name is the thing unless you have it as labeled as name, right?
Yeah.
Or would
So
you?
like you're basically declaring a variable that is assigned to the value of, you know, the first thing in that array, if that
Okay.
makes sense. So you
Yeah.
could call it name one, or you could call it
Hmm.
like, you know, property one,
Yeah.
or
You're
whatever.
you're calling it this, and then you're calling to the actual array.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That just I was like, wait a minute. I was like,
Yeah.
I was just confused.
Yeah. Probably a
I
lot of
work.
other people are confused too.
Yeah.
Don't
It's
worry
okay.
about it.
Yeah.
Like
I
you could
work them all
totally,
day.
yeah. But you like, and uh, just so that everybody knows, it's perfectly fine to access properties in array by doing it the other way, which is
Yeah.
like dogs array square bracket 0.
Mhm.
'Cause then it's the first thing in the array. You
Yeah.
don't need to destructure arrays. You don't need to destructure objects.
Mhm.
You can totally use dot notation for objects too, and that's
Yeah.
perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
It's just like some people prefer to destructure because it's like you don't need to do something dot something else.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
just do that something else. Um,
Yeah. I guess a question is this one of those things where if you saw it from another coder, you might be like, hey, by the way, did you know
no,
you could do this? No?
no,
It wouldn't be a thing where you'd go, this could be written better or anything.
no.
It doesn't matter as much.
Right. It doesn't matter as much. And
Okay.
like I tend to destructure things whenever I can. I just like doing that.
I mean, it
Uh,
seems shorter in a lot of ways, and it seems more cleaner. It seems cleaner,
yeah,
I guess,
yeah.
because
But
it's
there are
like this, then this, then that.
definitely use cases where it doesn't make sense at all to do that. Like
Okay.
I actually want this whole object and like or like I want most of the properties of this object except for like this one. I mean, in that case, you could do another little tricky thing, but regardless, like you could say like I want specifically like this one property of this object, but I also want the whole object. So I'm just going to do the whole object and then access that one property by doing
Mhm.
object dot property.
Yeah, yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing, and also
Yeah.
destructuring arrays. You don't see it a lot, and you probably don't use it a lot. Like
Yeah.
you would more likely use like the bracket notation for getting the properties of array.
Yeah.
Just
Now,
out there.
I'm yeah, I'm also kinda curious. Could you I'm gonna try to explain something that I don't fully understand, which is fun. So, could I also destructure and then in my function or whatever, like what is it, pop for an array to
Hmm.
get rid of one of them? I think that's
Uh-huh.
once you pop and then write the number that you wanna get rid of or something. Is that what it is? Because I know
Yeah.
there's pop, push, there's
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, anyways, can I continue the either dot notation to remove like if I didn't want the full array, if I wanted all but like one, could I call to all of it and then just add, hey, get rid of this one? Is that
Yeah.
a
So
thing?
there are ways to do that via destructuring.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. If you didn't want to import all of it, if you wanted
Uh-huh.
to import all but a couple or something, that way you can mention them all but a couple over and
Mhm.
over again without having to remove them every single time. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. So
cool.
basically, like you could write your destructuring kind of like statement in a way where like you you write the two things that you don't want in
Hmm.
your curly braces. So you're destructuring those two things, and then the comma, and then what you would do is do dot dot dot, and then whatever you want to call it. Like usually you will call it like rest, like the
Hmm.
rest of the stuff. So by writing dot 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 rest, that'll give you everything in the object except for the two things that you specifically structured out.
Huh. That's interesting. I didn't know
Yeah.
that existed. That's cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious about that. Interesting.
Yeah. It's pretty useful.
Yeah, it
Um,
seems like it would be. I mean, just for, so you're not just retyping the same thing over and over again and stuff. Like that's
yeah.
kind of sweet. So I guess another question then would be, are there other things that you can destructure? Or is it pretty much just like arrays and props?
Arrays and objects.
Arrays and objects, I mean. Sorry.
Yeah, and those are, as far as I know, the only things that you can destructure. Although strings, you might be able to destructure because you can do array-like things with strings. So,
Yeah.
like you can kind of treat strings as arrays. I know in a lot of cases this might not be one of them, but I'm wondering if you do like const uh A B C D, like square bracket A B C D E, and then equals in parentheses, or not in parentheses, sorry, in quotation marks, Jake.
Mhm.
I wonder if A B C D E would give you JAKE, and then nothing. Like E would be undefined. JAK. I can't. A B C
Who
D.
knows?
That's four. Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot how to count for a second.
It's
But
okay. I've done that multiple times on this pod. Seth and I work outside of this, okay? So, I'm sorry.
let's
I'm
see
sorry.
if
We're
you
not perfect.
can, let's see if you can destructure strings.
He's finding out.
Can you destructure strings in JavaScript?
It takes a minute.
Well, aren't you just a curious one? Unfortunately, you cannot destructure strings in JavaScript directly like you can with arrays or objects. However, you can treat a string as an array-like object and access individual characters using array-like syntax. For example, let str equals hello let A, B.
Sounds
Aren't you just a curious one? Unfortunately, you cannot destructure strings in
Serious Seth.
JavaScript directly.
Don't repeat it. You got it right. Kudos.
Did I?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. She
Okay.
said that you can call to each string. I'm not gonna. I just heard it, Seth. But she literally spelt out the first
Yeah.
letter or whatever. So I think you got it right, buddy.
Okay.
Kudos.
It
And
sounded
you know
like
what?
I didn't at first. But
Yeah. Because she said she started it with you can do objects and arrays, but then you can also do it similar, like you can call to string similarly to the way you can do an array or something like that.
Uh-huh.
She kind of explained. It sounded to me through my baby coder ears that you got it right.
Wait, hold on. I need to
He needs to know. He
know.
can't let it go. Come on.
How do you destructure strings in JavaScript? It takes so long.
It takes a minute. It's okay. It has to type it, has to send it. It's sending it around the world, Seth. Give it a break.
Well, honey, to destructure a string in JavaScript, you can use the built-in destructuring assignment syntax. First, you'll want to enclose the string in square brackets and assign it to a variable. Then, you can use the object destructuring syntax to access specific characters in the string. For example, let's say you have the string hello world. You could destruct
It only goes to like
to
60
destructure a string in JavaScript, you can
X
use the
amount
built.
of yeah. This is
Go
that
on.
this is that
First,
token.
you'll want to enclose the string in square brackets and assign
I
it.
need to do some more work on this.
This is that token limit that you're
Yeah,
running
it's a
into.
token limit. That's what it is.
Yeah. Oh, I know, because we talked
It's-
about it.
So it sounded like you can do it, but you need to like set it up
Mm-hmm.
differently than you normally would.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was hoping to get to the bottom of it immediately, but
But we got to like halfway to the bottom of it.
yeah, you gotta hit the token limit.
Oh, almost made it another joke. That wouldn't be good. 16-year-old Jake would have said it. Anyways.
Yeah. By the way, that was our new robot co-host.
Yeah.
That she's
What's its name?
I don't know. I think so. She's programmed to sound like a southern, like an elderly southern woman.
Yeah, a robot that was programmed by an elderly Southern woman is what it's kind of going for, because it sounds like a robot,
Yeah.
but its diction is very Southern.
Right.
Yeah.
I went to college in Nashville, and there was like the sweetest, like older Southern woman in the cafeteria, and she like checked you out and checked you in to the cafeteria and stuff. And her name was Miss Tanya, and she always called everybody baby. And it was like I already have grandmas that I love and I wouldn't replace them, but I want another one and I want it to be you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so
So,
funny. The other day I was at where was I? I ran into like Big Lots or something. I think it
uh-huh.
was Big Lots. And an older lady called me baby. And dude, it spun me. I was like,
Yeah,
"Alright."
you don't see that much in Maine.
Like,
Like,
yeah. But I don't know. I'm not used to it. But it's funny because my apprentice is from Arkansas.
okay.
So he has like a southern accent, and man, do we just like laugh about it all the time. Like, yeah, he'll just say like the most like wholesome, oh, oh, God darn it. Like, it's like, oh man.
Like a Ted Lasso type or something.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And he's unbelievably kind. He's a very, very good person.
Yeah.
And he's getting, we're breaking him down to make him a little bit more mean, but it's no, he's such a sweetheart.
Yeah.
But
I'm
yeah,
thinking of calling the robot Miss Tanya.
Miss Tanya. That's a very sweet like homage to Miss Tanya.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very cute robot too. And it has like buildings in the background. We'll post a picture of it or something. You
Yeah.
guys will see it at some point, but it is very cute. I saw it. I was like, ah, I like this. It's it's got good vibes.
Yeah. I need to up the token limit, I think. But
Yeah. Yeah.
anywho,
But
and I was
any
to speed it up.
I mean it's yeah. It's hey, you just built the thing, you know? It's like what if we had these kind of expectations out of babies? You know?
I do.
I do. My baby's gotta be reading now.
Know how to destructure strings in JavaScript.
Yeah. What are these loser babies? No, they're good babies.
Thank you.
Anyways, anyways, so I had a few notes written down today, and asynchronous JavaScript is something that I haven't run into yet, and I'm wondering if we should talk maybe a little bit about it just to kind of gloss over what it is, because hopefully by the next episode, I will have finished the full React course in Codecademy and we can start to work on the asynchronous JavaScript and we'll have more to kind of expound upon at that point. But right now, you want to give us an idea of what because I've heard it mentioned a few times and I've seen obviously there's a course on it and stuff, but I have no idea what it does or is or
Yeah. Yeah. So
and if this is out of left field too, you can just say no, Jake.
not at
End of
all.
episode.
It's really important, and it's like if you're doing app development specifically, you definitely need to know how to do it and what it is and how to do it and like how to work
Mhm.
with it and blah blah blah. The thing is, I asked Miss Tanya about asynchronous JavaScript, and she basically said, and it's this she's always right. I'm wrong here, but she basically said the opposite of how I would describe it. So
Okay.
the thing is, the way that it's like defined is allowing things to happen at the same time. So when you're doing synchronous stuff, basically you're saying like do this, then this, then this, then this.
Mhm.
Asynchronous, allegedly, is do all of this stuff at the same time.
Mm.
It's like, but the way that you actually use it is kind of the opposite of that. And like people, who fully grasp this are probably like somebody could explain this to me and
Mhm.
it would make sense to me eventually, I'm sure. Like I could ask Miss Tanya 5 more
Right.
times.
Write it in the comments or whatever you're on.
Yeah, tell
Message
me.
us, do something to be like, hey, I am the genius that knows
Yeah.
the true reason for asynchronous JavaScript's definition
Yeah.
and
So in
that
in
knowledge.
in practice, the way that you use it is say, do this thing, and then once this thing is done, do the other stuff.
Mhm.
And the way that you write it, usually like modern JavaScript, you would say you just declare a function called like get data, or whatever. And then within that function, or sorry, when you declare that function, you declare it as an async function, which is short for asynchronous.
Mhm.
So you'd say const get data equals, and then before your parentheses, you'd say async parentheses and then arrow function, and then open up your body and then do step within the body. And specifically, the step that you're going to be doing is when you're writing it, you're going to say like const data equals, and then you use the word await, and then write like you'd like call a function that like takes a minute to execute, basically.
Okay.
So that's called async await. That's like that they kind of go hand in hand. Like you can't write the word await and have it work without having the word async at the top of your function, like
Huh.
without declaring an async function.
Yeah. Huh.
So when you do const data equals await, you're usually going to be using what's called a fetch, and that's when you hit an API endpoint, you hit that via a function called fetch that's built into JavaScript now. It didn't used to
Okay.
be, but it is now. And when you fetch an API endpoint, like, you know, test.com/API/dogs or whatever, that's going to give you like a list of dogs eventually, but it takes a second for you to like reach out to some server somewhere, grab the information, send it back, and then it gives it to you in usually like a JSON object.
Yeah.
So, or if you don't know what JSON is, it's basically just an object. So you await that, and then you do your other stuff. So
Okay.
that to me sounds like you're not running things at the same time.
All at the same time,
waiting
because yeah, because the other stuff isn't run until that comes back. Because you're so maybe it's instead of organized in a way that kind of, if this happens, let this happen. It's kind of timed instead, in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, and so if you wanted, you could have them all do the functions all at once, but
Mhm.
you don't do that because that's not how you that's not how you would write it.
Mhm.
But you could, instead of normal JavaScript, it is forced, it's limited to having to, you know, go through the whole thing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean by that? Does that make sense at all? It might not.
I
It
don't
might
know.
not. Like, because you're talking about the await thing, but maybe the await thing, maybe they're talking about like it has the ability to not to do it without the await, and it could just do it all at once if it wanted.
Yeah, like maybe what I'm missing is like the fetch thing. If you don't write await,
Yeah.
then it's not going to wait for anything. It's just going to do the other stuff, and
Throw it all
you
out
know
there.
you get the result whenever you get it or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm saying, I'm not saying that's the like a correct way. I'm just saying maybe they define it that way because they're just
Mhm.
like, oh, you could do all this. And it's like, yeah, but you don't. So like, why are you
Uh-huh.
bringing it up? But like, so
Yeah.
meaning that the robot is wrong and Seth is right is what I'm trying to defend here, Seth.
Miss Tanya's always right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
like basically
it,
you grab the data and then you do something with it. You know, you have to wait for
yeah.
the data to get there before you do something with it.
Okay.
So that's kind of like how you use asynchronous
Hmm.
JavaScript.
Yeah. So you're kind of writing the timeline rules for the JavaScript versus writing the JavaScript and it just doing it
Yeah.
automatically.
Yeah.
Kind of? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right.
So,
All right.
but then you can also do like a lot of you can do a lot of async
Mhm.
stuff in a row. Like once you get the data, then access some properties of that, and then make another API call based on the properties of that.
Yeah.
The initial data that you got,
Yeah.
and then you
It
do another one after that.
it kind of reminds me of that time we were talking about the Keeper app and using what's it called API, ChatGPT's
Oh, okay.
API, in order to find enclosure sizes or enclosure setups or whatever.
Mhm.
And you were like, oh yeah, but you'll run into that token problem where, you know, if someone types in ball python and it sends out to, you know, to ChatGPT, hey, ball python enclosure, then it's going to charge me every time someone searches ball python. And then I was like, well, could you make it so instead of just automatically sending out, it could send out to my database first to see if I already have that. If it
Mhm.
doesn't, then it can send out to ChatGPT and then
Yeah.
it can retrieve that. It can save it in my database and give it to the person.
Right. Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
kind of the idea, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
and that's yeah, I almost just talked about something. I had mentioned asynchronous JavaScript, and that's kind of why we are talking about this. I had mentioned it off
Mhm.
episode, and that's what I was talking about when I was like, I feel like it's kind of like understanding how to. I use the word algorithms, but how to write something that I don't know, like is an actual solution to something. Like that's what that feels like. Kind of is like it's a solution to like needing an answer and checking another file for answers while you get another answer is like a way you can use that kind of a thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Yeah, so,
but
like,
I
if
don't know.
you if you were to write that, you would say, like, API data, so, like, your own API data,
Yeah.
like, keeper data equals await, and then the fetch to your own API. And
Mhm.
then if that comes up with nothing, like if keeper data equals undefined or null or
Yeah.
whatever, then await the chat GPT
API.
fetch. Yeah. And
Mhm.
then go off of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly it.
All right. Hey, I was talking about that a while ago. That's kind of
Yeah.
good. I mean, but that's just made sense how that would work. But
Yeah.
I didn't know the whole any of the await stuff or any of that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So to kind of take that another level deeper or whatever, there's another way that you could write that, which is instead of writing async function and then opening up the body, you could just write a regular function and still have the fetch or whatever asynchronous like function that you're trying to call. So like you
Mhm.
could just do fetch, the API endpoint, and then after that function, like after the close parenthesis of when you're calling that function, you would do dot then and then open another set of parentheses.
Mhm.
And the first argument that gives you that then function gives you is what you would have gotten if you did the const data equals fetch,
Huh.
wait fetch. So
Yeah.
it when you do the first argument, you could name data and work with it within the body of that then function the same way that you would have worked with it if you were like
The other way with the fetch
doing
and
it
all
with
that
an
stuff.
async and a wait.
Huh, and a wait. Yeah, that's what I meant. Huh. Interesting. So that's just like a cleaner way to write it, basically,
Not cleaner.
or just
I
is
would
it
say
just
that
like the thing we were talking about earlier with the dot notation versus the
yeah,
yeah
so
yeah.
there are certain use cases for the then stuff
Hmm.
that would make sense in certain cases.
Yeah.
Then but I would say it's cleaner to write it with the async and await. You're not kind of like only working with the data. Basically, you only have access to the data within the parentheses of that then function
Yeah.
call. So basically, like if you want to work with that data outside of those parentheses, basically it just kind of like feels freer, I guess.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
trapped
Yeah.
within the parentheses.
Yeah.
Uh, but along with then, you also have access to something called catch, which is if if you typed the API endpoint wrong, like if you left out a letter or like spelled something wrong, and then it would give you an error. And it would never hit the dot then like function. Like
Yeah.
it would never give you the data.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a dot catch, you wouldn't really know what's up or whatever.
Yeah.
The first argument of the dot catch is an error. It just gives you like an error message, basically. So
All right. Is this what you were talking about maybe episode or two ago when you were like, what are you putting out there for error something? It was like, what was it? It was,
error handling.
yeah. Yeah. Is
Yeah,
this kind of like that?
yeah. This
Yeah.
has to do with error handling.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that like, puts up like a little thing on the actual screen that says like, hey, error.
Yeah,
Just so people know that something's actually going on. But like, so this is covered under that kind of where it's like, it'll kind of help the coder find an error when there is one.
yeah,
Huh.
yep,
Interesting. That's cool.
yeah. So then, along with then and catch, you have one other like function property that they give you, which is a dot finally, and that will call that will you will hit that stage of like the asynchronous workflow, whether it errors out or not.
Yeah.
So if you have like a loading state on your component, you
Mhm.
could call like set loading is equal to true before you ever call your like fetch, and then you could do set loading is equal to false at the finally part, because
Okay.
whether you actually got the data or you got like an error, you
Yeah.
still stop loading. Like you don't want
Yeah.
to load
To-
forever.
yeah. That makes sense.
So you could say loading is equal to false in both your then statement and your catch statement,
Yeah.
or you could just do it once in the dot finally.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
That
makes
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes sense because that means that in both of those other statements, it would show it would be false, so it would shut it off.
sense.
Or you could just do it finally, and it would just shut it off at the end of whenever things come into fruition or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. So, how broad is asynchronous JavaScript? Does that cover a lot of it, or is it like, am I going to dip my toe and realize that it's an ocean,
So
like with
yeah.
JavaScript?
So there's definitely a lot more to it.
Mhm.
The main thing that we didn't get into was like how to write your own asynchronous functions. So
Mhm.
like we've just been talking about like accessing asynchronous data basically,
Mhm.
but there are ways to write functions that are like intended to be waited on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Intended to be waited on.
Yeah. So
I'm just
like
trying to. I'm just trying to like. Okay. All right. So like, do you mean that as in there are functions that are waiting to happen until waiting for something to happen before they can happen?
yeah, so
Or
like let me give you an example real quick. So like
okay.
if you have like a kind of like processing intensive like function that you need to write, and you have like another function that you need to like call immediately after that like process intensive thing
Yeah.
has run, then you basically need to set it up as an async as a like a function that is going to be called like asynchronously.
Asynchronous. Yeah.
So the way that you would do that is with something called a promise. Like there's like I guess it would be technically like an API in JavaScript, and it's sort of like an API in a way that's like different than the way that we normally talk about it. But basically, it's just like a pre-written function that JavaScript gives you to work with, and that's called a promise. And basically, you can you the way that you set up a promise is you say like balanced like heavy process or something equals, and then you'd write the word new space and then capital promise. and that's sort of like calling a class, basically.
Yeah.
And within that promise, the first argument that it gives you, the first argument that it gives you is resolve, and the second argument that it gives you is reject. And
Hmm.
so so that would be like promise, open parentheses, and then open another set of parentheses, which is within that you write resolve, comma, reject, and then
Mhm.
close the parentheses equals arrow function, and then open up the body of your function that you're writing here. So then you write all of your process intensive code like that will take a minute, like not a minute, but like a couple
Yeah.
seconds or a second. And then at the bottom of that, you would call resolve and then open and close parentheses. And
Hmm.
that's like how you know you're finished,
Huh.
basically. And then if you have a case within your code where like, oh, I know that if this thing exists, then something went wrong or something, or like if this thing doesn't exist, then something went wrong, then you can
Yeah.
call reject, open and close parentheses. And
Yeah.
that will return like an error
Yeah.
when you eventually call this function.
Yeah.
So then when you have set all of that up, you would then in your async function, when you're like writing the body of that function, you can call this like process intensive function that you just wrote as like const data equals, I forget what I called it, like process heavy function or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Heavy process
You
function.
do equals await process heavy function, and
Mhm.
then after that, whatever you wanted to call after that whole thing ran.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so all of that is basically to say like the fetch function that I was talking about before, where you can like access API endpoints and
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
that's written as a promise.
Oh. Huh.
Like that whoever like set up that like fetch functions like
Yeah.
in the W3 or whatever like
Yeah.
high up body or whatever, they set it up as a promise
Huh.
because like you await promises and that's like
Yeah.
what you actually like get. So that's like that's how you set up the things to be awaited on.
Yeah.
The things, everything that you await is a promise.
Is a promise.
Yeah.
Huh. That's kind of funny. You're awaiting promises.
Yeah.
It's written. It's a smart way to write it though because it's memorable. Like I
Yeah.
can remember. Like that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
There's
Like I promise I will eventually give you data. Just wait a
yeah.
second.
Okay, I'm waiting on that. Yeah, yeah. I like that. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like I kind of I appreciate it when things like click like
Uh-huh.
that. You know. Sweet. All right.
Yeah. I'm sure
I don't.
nobody like followed that promise
No,
stuff,
no. I mean,
but like
I
you will get into it and then you'll be
yeah.
like, oh, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly, which is what I kinda wanted this to
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
is, kind of a small introduction into it, and then, like, the next episode, I think, will be a lot more into some asynchronous and some just other stuff that I will have learned by that point.
Right. And
Um,
for like other people following along, if you're kind of lost with that promise stuff, if you take the asynchronous JavaScript course on Codecademy, which I
yeah,
did, like that was one
yeah,
of the ones that like really like changed my like career
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
It's like I went on to Codecademy and took the asynchronous JavaScript course, and then I was like, oh, I understand like a lot more
yeah,
now, and like it can do a lot more now. Like
yeah,
that allowed me to do a lot more really quickly and like fully understand like how to write like API calls and stuff, which
yeah,
is like what you do a lot
that's
when you're
pretty
writing
huge.
application. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to just let everyone know where I am at currently. I am in Learn React course on Codecademy. I'm at 41%. The lesson currently is props. And yeah, I just wanted to let people
Yeah.
know just in case that they were following along. Like I said, within the next week and a half, I should finish that entirely. And then I'm going to be jumping on over to asynchronous JavaScript. unless Seth has a different idea for me if he wants me to jump onto something else.
No,
Or-
that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. But yeah, that's where we be. And yeah, I think that's all of the questioning that I have for tonight, unless you have any other thoughts or anything like that.
No, I
No?
don't. Just I
Jeez.
keep swimming. Just keep
Keep at
swimming.
it. I mean, I've been preaching it to Charles, just like, hey, just keep going, even if it seems like, not the most fun thing. It's like it's a means to an end, and eventually, like where I'm at right now, which obviously I'm still so new with it, but
Mhm.
like just where I'm at right now, it's not such a struggle learning things. When they
Mhm.
explain something, I don't really need to read it 5 times anymore,
Cool.
which is pretty sweet because
Yeah.
I was listening to maybe episode 5 or something is
Mhm.
out when this came out, and like it was bleak. And I
Yeah.
remember that rut where it's like, man, like I just want to understand, but it's so hard to even I don't even know what half these words are.
Yeah.
At this point, I read something and it's like, oh yeah, I get what they're asking me to do. Which just to get to that point, it's like it's starting to understand how a car works.
Mhm.
Sure, I need to understand the names for all of the parts still, but I understand kind of how the whole thing works,
Yeah.
at least a little bit. Enough so when they explain something to me, I'm dumbfounded that that had a name, instead of being dumbfounded as far as like, okay, what?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is doing this, this, and this. Like now I'm like, oh, I didn't know it was called that,
Right.
but it makes sense that it's doing that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is pretty huge. So
Yeah.
it gets easier, is all I'm saying. It does get easier.
Right. Like you were saying, like there are definitely points, like not just like a single point, but several points where you're gonna be like I don't really
Yeah,
want to do this anymore, kind
where
of
it's a
thing.
drag.
But
Yeah,
like if you can power through those,
yeah,
the consistency will pay off. Like
yeah,
consistency is key.
yeah,
Just do a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah. I mean, if you
Do a
can't,
little bit.
yeah, if you can't do a little bit every night, do it every few nights. If you can't do it
Yeah.
every few nights, do it once a week. Make sure that you do it at least once a week. Like that's what I've been trying to
Yeah.
do with myself, because yeah, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
And I appreciate anyone listening, and I appreciate you, Seth, as always. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah. Thanks for
And
listening. Thanks for talking.
yeah, I hope everyone has a great week or weekend in the future when you're hearing this, and have a good day.
All right. See ya.